So let's just start because we have so much information to go through. So if you notice here, it says two things. The emerald tablet, singular, of Hermes. Hermes is the Greek god of wisdom. Hermes Trismegistus, or thrice great Hermes. And the emerald tablets, plural, of Thoth the Atlantean. And it's important to understand that these are two separate things. They were both written by the same being, okay? This is a singular tablet that brings forth some spiritual laws. And I'm just going to show you a brief version of that. But most of what we're going to be discussing today are these very deep tablets. There were 12 or 13, or some people say 15 of these tablets that talk about Thoth's history. So these ancient tablets tell the history of Thoth, the Atlantean, his youth, his spiritual training. They reveal knowledge about the ancient ones, and this is very profound, mysterious subject we're going to get into, and the secrets of immortality. They also disclose secrets about a lost history of the planet, a history that most of us know only about in legend, and that is Atlantis. And I've done an entire presentation on Atlantis for Portal to Ascension that's amazing, but I've got a few images in here that definitely deal with Atlantis in its past, and also Atlantis and how in the archaeological discoveries that we're now finding underwater from Earth satellites. So these tablets disclose also prophecies about the return of Thoth, the god of wisdom, and the return of light to our planet after our going through a very dark time. So Thoth the Atlantean, and I love this image, isn't it just totally beautiful? And it's got, of course, the third eye, or the Tijratil, as it's often called, right there in the forehead, and the awakening of the triangle, the merger of the two into one that allows us to awaken our consciousness. This is connected with the Trinity of the Divine Father, Mother, and Child, with the trifold flame of the Sacred Heart, and with the spiritual technology that I'll be sharing with you at the very end of this presentation. So Thoth was a great initiate, and he is still alive. He is an immortal. He has figured out how to overcome death. And he remained in his body and has incarnated in human form from time to time at different points in the centuries in order to bring us wisdom. But he still retains his original body. And of course, he can awaken and communicate with people at a spiritual level, at a psychic level, or I'm sure even at a physical level. As I was sharing earlier, I first encountered him about 35 years ago, and he's been one of my greatest, most profound teachers. Is the reason why I set up the Phoenix Fire Lodge Mystery School. I would never have done that on my own. He came 3 times within 1 year and asked me to do it. And so after then contemplating it for a whole nother year, I began the first level of the mysteries. And we finally have those 12 discourses online. Thoth was the original Sumerian god known as Ningishzida. Ningishzida was the second son of Enki. Those of you who followed the story of Nibiru know that Zechariah Sitchin translated these Sumerian cuneiform tablets and came out with a 10-book series called the Earth Chronicles series, where he literally is able to take what's in these tablets and these books and compare them to what we know in human time. In other words, in the human world, we know that airplanes are possible, rocket ships are possible, language is possible, levitation is possible. These are all things that our much more ancient ancestors, let's say 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, they might have known that the gods could do them, but they did not have the spiritual technology to have spaceships themselves. So Ningishzida, Nin means Lord, okay, or lady, and Gishzida. So you can see him. Maxfield Parrish did this painting of him, and I just love it. Often, as we're going to see, he is shown with the caduceus, which is one of his most profound hermetic emblems or symbols, because it's representative of both DNA and also the process of spiritual enlightenment. Now, he was known in Egypt as both Thoth and Tahuti. Tahuti is almost like a nickname, a name of familiarity. And we get, of course, the word thought in our English language today from the word Thoth. He was the overseer of all true mystery schools, and we see all sorts of images, Hermetic images, in this painting. It's a more modern painting, but we see, of course, the two eyes, and he's standing in the middle, meaning that he's sort of the doorway to the third eye, the opening of the third eye. He's a lunar god. We can see a moon behind him, and we see Mut. This is a vulture goddess over his head. Mut was very well known in the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom. She's the goddess of recycling the universe. And of course, we see the pardon me, pyramids behind him. And as we're going to see, Thoth actually designed the Great Pyramid of Giza. In Greece, Thoth was known as Hermes Trismegistus, or Mercury. He was associated certainly with the planet of communication, the planet of transportation. He was known as the scribe of the gods because of his ability to write. He was also an architect of the gods because he was an incredible engineer, an architect and mathematician. He worked with sound, as we're going to see. And here we see this beautiful stamp from Greece. What a gorgeous drawing that depicts him, of course, with the caduceus, with the flying sandals, and with the flying helmet. And here he is in New York City. I just love this picture. This is, I think it's Central Park, if I remember correctly. Just an absolutely beautiful image of Hermes Trismegistus, or thrice great Hermes. And here again, we see him as the god of transportation. So, you know, the planet Mercury, which was associated with him in astrology, rules communication and transportation. So these, of course, are things associated with him. In Egypt, of course, he's often depicted with this ibis head. This is the zoomorphic form. And we see here again certain Hermetic symbols. We see the Ankh, the symbol for eternal life. We see the serpent energy here, which represents the Kundalini. We see Kepra, represents the creator, the one that divides itself into two, the one beyond gender that divides itself into the divine father and mother. We see Mut, the goddess of transmutation, and this looks like the owl. The owl is a symbol of clairvoyance, those who can see in the darkness what others cannot see. He was known as the god of wisdom. And here we see him holding one of these 5 or 6 implements that often are shown associated with him. This one's called the was, like spelled like was, W-A-S. And we're going to be delving a little deeper into that in just a few minutes. Here we see him in his Masonic apron. And of course, the Freemasons, the mystery schools, all of those come out of Thoth. They come out of the training of the human beings that were chosen to be priests or priestesses in order to convey knowledge and information to mankind. So he's holding with the emerald tablet right here, isn't he? You have to really look, but there's writing on it. And of course, why the color green? Green, of course, in the chakras is connected with the heart chakra, isn't it? The importance of connecting with our heart, the heart intelligence, which, you know, the Heart Math Institute has proved is 5,000 times stronger than the mind. The electromagnetic energy field of the heart is 5,000 times stronger than the mental body. Incredible. So, of course, it's no accident that he chose this color. Here's the ibis bird in rushes. He's standing on what appears to be a dragon or an alligator. Kind of look, it's more like a dragon to me. And the dragon is breathing fire. This is a Hermetic symbol. And you might wonder, what does it mean? So just for a moment, ponder that before I tell you. Well, it's a reptile, right? We have a reptilian nature, don't we? Right. That reptilian nature is connected to the reptilian brain. The reptilian brain functions on 4 levels. It's about fighting, feeding, fleeing, and fornicating. Yep, the 4 F's, okay? So we either run from something, we fight something to survive, we, have to eat and have food, or we, have sex in order to propagate the species. So the reptilian brain is about survival, and it's also about kind of primal urges. So he has his foot on it, doesn't it? Telling us that he's conquered these primal urges in himself. He's mastered his reptilian mind. And of course, the dragon is breathing fire. Where do we know that fire comes from? In the human body, it's the base of the spine, isn't it? It's the fire energy of the Kundalini. So this is one who has mastered his Kundalini. He's managed to pull the Kundalini up the spine, activate the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, masculine and feminine nervous systems, and bring them together in order to awaken the third eye and to fly free and soul travel. And so you can see here he's also wearing the Masonic pharaoh's headdress, and you can see the cobra coming right out of the third eye. And he is faithful. He is faithful like a dog. He is faithful to humanity. He doesn't abandon us, even though we seem to be asleep at the wheel a lot of the time. So he was a scientist. He was a scholar. He was a linguist. He was a teacher. He was an alchemist. He was a chemist. He was a hermeticist. And so in the Middle Ages, many times we see these depictions of Hermes Trismegistus, involved with these alchemical operations. Now remember, during the Middle Ages, that's what, 13, 14, 15, 1600s. We only sort of started coming out of that in maybe the 1700s. A lot of this information was banned by the church. There were underground alchemists and hermeticists, but if you were found investigating this kind of stuff, many times you were killed or arrested or imprisoned. And so in the Middle Ages, you'll see all sorts of people who are trying to work out what these sacred geometries mean, what these hermetic symbols mean. These, of course, are Hebrew fire letters on this column, Joachim and Boaz, okay? Those are the meaning of these two. And the 2 columns, if you've followed any of my other work, it has to do with stepping from the mundane world into the inner sanctum, pulling back the veils. This is one of many meanings behind these 2 columns. Now, most of the Egyptian images we have of Thoth are animal images. That's called zoomorphic, and instead of human or anthropomorphic. And this is a fuller one of him with his stylus. Many times in these we'll see Thoth appearing as the ibis bird, and it was actually a crime in Egypt to kill the ibis bird because there were these flying snakes that came over from Libya. If you ever read Herodotus, Herodotus was a historian. Let's see if I've got his book around here somewhere. Yep. Herodotus, he was a Greek historian from about 450 BC. And this is a really boring looking cover, but actually he's a very chatty, interesting writer. And book 2 of his histories, there's 10 of them, is all about Egypt, and very interesting what he discovered when he went to Egypt. And what he talks about is that every year there would be an invasion of these kind of flying snakes, small, medium, and large, that would come over from Libya. He said he saw an entire pile of the bones of these flying snakes. Well, you know how scared we are of snakes. Imagine a flying one. So the only creature that would stop it was the ibis bird. It would just swoop down and swoop it up in its mouth, and I guess its bill was long enough that the snake couldn't turn around and bite the ibis bird. So this was one of the reasons the ibis bird was considered a great protector of ancient Egypt. Now, we also see Thoth as the Homachus Baboon. Here's the Homachus Baboon. You might ask yourself, why in the world would anybody choose a baboon? They're not like the most attractive creatures. Here's the baboon, Thoth in the baboon form with his hand up to the pharaoh wearing the blue crown instead of the white crown, okay? And here he is in his Ibis, headed version. So why? Well, if you study the life cycles of the animals, which clearly the Egyptians and the gods did very, very carefully, they chose these hermetic symbols with great care. So why in the world would someone want to pick a baboon as their power animal, so to speak? Well, the baboon, the Homachus baboon, every morning stands and bows and chatters with its hands up and down to the rising sun. So in other words, he honors the light. And as the sun goes down at night, he honors the light. And even though Thoth was officially a moon god or a lunar god, where Ra was definitely a solar god, in truth, Thoth was about combining the male and the female, the lunar and the solar, in order to bring us into balance. So if you look at his headdress here, for example, you see it's lunar on the bottom, but it's solar, the circle with the dot at the center on the top. So he's one who has combined the two together in true mastery, because he understood that both the male and female are equally as important. Thoth is, of course, linked with the moon traditionally because his older brother Ra was linked with the sun, and the rising of the sun god Ra every day. He charted these lunar cycles as a scientist, and he discovered how they affected the tides, how they affect gestation cycles, how they affect violent cycles. And this is, of course, all stuff that we have discovered today. We've discovered that the moon has a great electromagnetic influence on many things, including, all the seasons, the menstrual cycles of every kind of creature, the gestation cycles of every kind of creature. It also pulls the minerals up into the plant during the full moon. And of course, during the new moon, all the energies go more dormant, which is why Thoth taught that you should plant in the new moon when everything's really quiet energetically, electromagnetically, and then harvest the crops in the full moon to get the highest nutrient value. Thoth is a lunar deity linked to the creation of the yearly calendars and the cycles of time. He was very much involved with understanding the cycles of time. And of course, to do this, that meant that he was an astronomer. And he taught astronomy. He was known as the Logos. Now, who have we heard was referred to as the Logos? Jesus, the Logos, the Word. It was Thoth's great skill in celestial mathematics which made proper use of the laws upon which the foundation and maintenance of the universe rested. Thoth was said to embody this Logos, or the Word of God. As the heart and tongue of the sun god Ra, Thoth was also the reason and the mental powers of the god, and also the means by which their will was translated into speech. It was said that Thoth, divine thought, spoke the words which resulted in the creation of the heavens and the earth. So in the Egyptian world, there was a big conversation about, how everything arose from this cosmic egg, just as in the Hindu tradition and the Buddhist tradition and the Celtic tradition. It's said that, we're floating in this cosmic egg. Well, the cosmic waters could be all of space. The cosmic eggs literally are these galaxies. If you ever see the picture of the galaxies, they look like cosmic eggs. And that really, when the cosmic egg awakens, it becomes the lotus blossom. So the question, theoretically, philosophically, with the Egyptians was, what came first? Did light come first, like the Big Bang? Okay, in the beginning was the Big Bang. Okay, was sound first? In the beginning was the word, the Logos, like the Bible tells us. In the beginning was the thought of creation, the mind of God, or Thoth. Okay, so again, these are deeper philosophical questions that they ask themselves. And of course, they didn't mean literally Thoth, but they meant the consciousness of the one that he embodied. So in the same way that light exists in relationship to the sun, Thoth exists in relationship to Ra. In other words, thought exists in relationship to light. Okay, and the Logos exists in relationship to the transcendent God. The Logos is sort of the blueprint for everything. You know, the knowledge, the word, the sound, the hue sound, the vibrational energy that allows creation to even ripple out into the manifest universes. Now here is a baboon offering a third eye to an ibis bird. I mean, so what is this? This is Thoth offering enlightenment to Thoth, right? The higher self offers enlightenment to Thoth. And of course, Thoth is lunar and he's solar here on the boat of a million years. Kind of fun. Once you start getting into Hermetics, you'll be hooked. It's so fun. I love this image of him. It's so beautiful because he was a very beautiful man. He was an incarnation of one of the four great Kumaras, and I talk about the four Kumaras in my book on Jesus. I don't know how many of you have read any of my books, but they're all, you know, deep, and they all have like 100 illustrations, because how can you teach Hermetics if you don't have pictures? And I love the pictures. And they all have about 100 pages of back matter, and I think the Jesus book has 1,200 footnotes, but most of the rest of them have like 500 footnotes. So who are the Kumaras? Well, the Vedas speak of the four great Kumaras, the four sons of God that periodically incarnate into the worlds of form. Sanat Kumara, the head of the Great White Brotherhood, Sananda Kumara, who was, of course, Jesus, Sananka Kumara, who was, of course, Thoth, that set up the mystery schools, and Sanantana Kumara, who was Horus and Rama and Krishna. They all have different MOs, but Sananka's Kumara's MO, Thoth, is basically as a great teacher of humankind. Now, his chief shrine was in the middle of Egypt, okay? So I don't know how many of you have been to Egypt. I've taken groups to Egypt, and I will go back if you're ever interested in going. It'd be wonderful to have you. But the Egyptians set up their temples like the chakras. So we have Abu Simbel, the first chakra down here. We have Philae, which is sort of the pregnancy chakra, where Isis gave birth to Horus. We have Kawambo and Edfu, which are the third chakras. Those were dedicated to your will or your power and overcoming your fear. We have the heart chakra, Luxor, and which was known as Thebes in the day, and Karnak with the heart and the high heart here. Okay, and then it comes up to Dendera, which is the Hathor's temple of sound, and then it comes to Hermopolis, and Hermopolis is almost like in the geographic center of all of Egypt. The pyramids are up here. This is where Giza is, and Memphis. And then these are the dendrites of the brain. Alexander the Great set up the city of Alexandria right here, okay? The oracle temples of Sais were in this area. The great temples of Heliopolis, which was probably the most powerful of all the spiritual complexes for a long time, was here, the Temple of the Sun. The walls are 44 feet thick, just to give you an idea, and in its heyday it had 1,300 priestess astronomers. And so Hermopolis is very little known today. And then later when Akhenaten, you remember the heretic king, okay, who really tried to say all the gods come back and resolve to one, which is true, which the priests knew, but you know, the people were attached to their versions of God. He set up his city right in this area. So it's sort of the geographic center, but it's not very, today this area is kind of taken over by bandits, okay? It's a little bit of a dangerous area to be able to really go to. But it was known as Hermopolis Magna. Magma means great, okay? Magna, and Hermopolis Polis means city. So the city of Hermes, the great city of Hermes, okay? So these are just some of the many things that Thoth brought to the human race, and they are innumerable, but I'm just going to go through a few. He taught humanity medicine, and his daughter was Isis, who also went on to teach humanity medicine. Isis's son was Horus. Horus his half human, half divine son was Aesculapius. Aesculapius comes before Hippocrates. When doctors become doctors, they take the Hippocratic oath. Aesculapius is way before that. Okay, so Thoth taught us medicine, and this, of course, means herbs. We didn't have, the vast pharmaceutical empires that we have today that are not necessarily always, doing good for humanity. Some of the time they are. Some of the time they are saving lives, but as we all know, pharmaceuticals have many side effects. So these were herbs, homeopathy, aromatherapy, all of this was known within the ancient world. Poultices, tinctures, distillation processes, all of this really came from Thoth's desire to not see humanity suffer. Thoth gave us alchemy. As above, so below, as within, so without. These are just some of Thoth's many hermetic laws of wisdom, and we'll cover a few of those in this presentation. The ancient name for Egypt was actually Chem or Kemet, from which we get alchemy or chemistry today. And most people don't realize that. Kemet is Egypt. This ancient name actually means the Black Lands or the hidden mysteries. Now, why would they call it the Black Lands? Because every year around July 24th, there would be a flood that would come down from the southern Africa. Southern Africa is actually higher than northern Africa. And the Nile actually is the only, it's the longest vertical river in the world, and it's the only one that runs north. I don't know if you guys know, but like the Mississippi runs south. Almost all the other rivers run south or east or west, but not north. And the Nile, if you remember this from geography when you were growing up, runs north. So as the snows would melt in South Egypt, like the Nubia, they would come down and take the rich topsoil and fertilize the whole Nile and flood it. And so all the crops would flourish. So Egypt became actually the breadbasket of Europe and the Mediterranean for many, many centuries. But so this is a double meaning. The black lands, meaning the black topsoil, the rich soil, and the black or hidden or secret mysteries. Okay, so you can see it's a play on words because this was the place where this wisdom was brought. Thoth gave us chemistry. Now, you may wonder about that, but certainly the gods knew about the periodic table. How can we prove this? Because they were going after gold. They understood that they had a problem with their ozone on their planet. Their scientists had figured out that if you suspend gold foil sheeting, very thin sheeting, it blocks the cosmic rays, just like we've discovered that when we put that gold foil sheeting on the windows of our astronauts' vehicles, it blocks the cosmic rays from affecting them in a negative way. So why were the gods down here? Initially for themselves, for their own salvation of their planet. And so in order to accomplish that, they needed to have gold as a valuable mineral. And of course, today we have a gold standard. Everything's based on gold, because this was the most precious thing for them, not because they wanted to put it in Fort Knox, but because they needed it for scientific purposes. They were that advanced in their knowledge. These precious metals were used to protect their planet from cosmic rays. And so just like if it had been mercury, or if it had been aluminum, or if it had been platinum or tin or silver, that would have probably become our monetary standard. Thoth gave us mathematics. He understood the golden mean spiral, and we can see the spiral right here. And it's literally the way that the whole universe unfurls, the way flowers and roses unfurl, the way a nautilus shell unfurls, the way your hair unfurls at the top of your head, the way your fingernails, your fingerprints unfurl on your fingers. So the whole organic world is really built on this template, which we could talk about at great length. But he brought us also the knowledge of sacred geometry, which we see again and again in these medieval texts where, the sacred geometry is being used, or we're trying to grasp it or understand how to use it. mathematics, astronomy, and sacred geometry were essential to construct the pyramids. These pyramids are designed totally in alignment with north, south, east, and west. They're aligned to the heavens. They're connected with the Orion system. So they had to know math. They had to have geography. They had to have astronomy. They had to have mathematics in order to even design them. And of course, this was in sacred sites around the world. Not only Thoth, but other Atlantean initiates and priests were sent out to set up these sites. And this is why we have such similar buildings of pyramids all over the world, from China to Central America, North America, Antarctica, Europe, and of course the Middle East. These sacred sites were all set up to align with the heavens. So this tells us that they had a very advanced knowledge of astronomy and geo movements. And this is something that's just been kind of discovered in the last maybe 10, 20 years, as people like Robert Bauval, Graham Hancock, and some of my colleagues on the circuit have written books specifically going out and showing what these alignments are. Now, we've all known them from places like Stonehenge, the equinoxes, the solstices, the lunar eclipses, and so forth. But we've discovered them now for most of these ancient sites, and they're really, really remarkable. And just so that you know, if you're not familiar with the terms, or you're not sure what the solstices and equinoxes mean, every year there are two equinoxes, one in the spring and one in the fall, okay? So they call it the vernal equinox in the spring and the autumnal equinox in the fall, but all you have to remember is spring and fall. And they usually happen around March 23rd and September 23rd, someplace in there. And this is really where the sun, the day and the night are of equal duration. Then, of course, during the summer, the sun, the days get longer, and we have June 21st as the summer solstice. And then, of course, we're coming up now towards December time. December 21st, the shortest day and the longest night of the year. So what actually happens is the sun's position in the sky actually changes relative to the earth. So the sun is highest in the sky in its southernmost position when we're in the summer, in June, okay? And then it's lowest in the sky here. So this is why Christmas is 3-4 days afterwards. So on the 21st, the sun appears to die. It's at its lowest position, its darkest. And then the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, it appears to stand still, and then it awakens and begins its yearly movement back to where 6 months later it will actually come to its zenith on June 21st. So that's actually how it works. And in my backyard, the sun comes up, and it's so interesting. You know, I have like a Mary garden and a St. Francis garden and a Kuan Yin garden. And when I first moved here 18 years ago and built this house, the sun, you know, and the equinox comes up in the middle, and then it go over here, then it go over here, the two times of the year. But I can tell that the poles have shifted at least 9 degrees towards Siberia, because now it comes up in a different position. It's more to the north. The whole thing is shifted over to the north. So we definitely are having slow pole shifts. So the equinoxes and the solstices have been celebrated by almost every culture of the world that you can possibly name, from the Native Americans, the South and Central Americans, the Tibetans, the Celts, all throughout the world, because this is a worldwide phenomena. Thoth's knowledge of astronomy allowed him to actually align these ancient sites with the star constellations. And this is one in southern Egypt that's aligned with Orion, as many of them are. And of course, the work of Robert Bauval, I think, is part of what has come out. And these are the 3 stars, sorry, that was hidden behind the S, of the Orion's belt, the Orion system, where it said that the seat of the Galactic Council resides, which is one of the reasons why Orion was so important to the ancients. The Pleiades as well, because we certainly have seeding from the Pleiades system, the Sirius system, and the Orion system. These are three of the most important constellations to the ancient world because of our deep involvement with these civilizations. And you can see here the Giza Pyramids, and these are Orion's belt. And this, of course, is blocking it, but actually it's the World Trade Center, believe it or not. So, you know, even though we don't seem like we are very aware of this stuff today or utilizing sacred geometry in the building of most of our architecture, there are people who are trying to do some of this, and that's a good thing. These structures were not just ceremonial, however, they actually were also functional. And there are many people who've talked about how the Great Pyramid was actually some kind of a energy machine, okay? And of course, traditional archaeology wants to say, hey, it was built, you know, in the first dynasty by the Pharaoh Khufu, which I'm sure is not true at all, just like they'd like to dismiss the water erosion over the Sphinx that was discovered by Robert Scooch, the geologist, that shows that the Sphinx was around during the Great Flood. And this is one of the reasons why the limestone is so eroded by water. So Thoth and his father Ptah, who was a master engineer, used the Great Pyramid as part of an energy system. Today, we're still trying to figure out exactly how that worked, but it was surrounded by water. In southern Egypt, definitely there was some uranium mining. I have done some research around this, and there are other researchers less well known than the colleagues I've mentioned that have also done some of this, but certainly they had figured out a way to have a perpetual energy machine. So Thoth was said to be able to regulate the magnetic fields of number, form, shape, magnetism, and sound. Let's think about that. Number, form, shape, magnetism, and sound. The magnetic fields. How would we use that? Well, levitation. He was a master of levitation. How were Stonehenge built? How were all these great, gigantic, 50, 80, 70, 100-ton blocks moved? Levitation. Um, we are still trying to discover that today. And in fact, in China, they actually are working on it. In Russia, they're working on it. And if you guys remember, there was a program I saw just recently about this little guy who was like 4'11", who down in Florida, he had fallen in love with this woman. He was a foreign guy, and she broke his heart, but he kept thinking that she would come, and he built this whole place for her, the Coral Castle, I think that's what it's called. And nobody knows how he did it. Gigantic rocks that he couldn't have moved. I mean, a 6 foot, 7-man couldn't have moved. And he said he did it really through sound, but he worked at night, so nobody saw him. Pretty interesting. And of course, levitation makes a whole lot more sense than, 100,000 men having to move 240-ton or 70-ton or 100-ton blocks, which is the current version. In fact, I've been to England many, many times. I love England, and it's a very magical land. But if you go to Stonehenge, part of the, story that they want to convey is painted on the wall as you go underneath the highway, and it's men like this moving these gigantic blocks, just like at Easter Island. They want us to think that they were just these little 5 and 6 foot humans that did it all with pulleys and ropes. That's not true, especially when you consider that you can't even put like a piece of paper between these blocks. They fit so tightly together, and they're gigantic in size. So levitation was a way that they did this, and Thoth, of course, was the master of it. He had figured out how to do it. Now, Thoth was known as a Time Lord. And let me say, there really actually are real Time Lords. And towards the very end of this presentation, we'll talk about the 7 Time Lords that oversee the cycles of time, and how Thoth was connected with them. But one of the reasons he was called a Time Lord is because he really invented the calendar. It used to be that before the Great Flood, there were 360 days in every year. Now there are 365.25 days in every year, and that's the calendar that we still use today. And of course, we do 365, and every 4th year we have a leap year. And that's how we handle this quarter of a day at the end of February. Thoth was called the reckoner of time and seasons. And here, of course, we see these seasons of the earth that you would have to be able to literally be an astronomer, probably go into outer space to be able to figure all this stuff out. So, of course, here's the December 21st. It's the 22nd, it's the day after the solstice. Here's the summer solstice. Here's the autumn equinox, and here's the spring equinox. And it kind of shows you what happens, where one side of the earth is tilted at that 23-24 degree angle, and that part of the earth is getting more heat from the sun, and then as it moves around it shifts, and so then this part of the earth is getting hit and getting more sun. So that's why we have summer in the southern hemisphere when we have winter in the northern hemisphere, is because of that 24-degree tilt of the earth. He was called the one who measured out the heavens and planned the earth. Now, what could that possibly mean? Oh yeah, longitude and latitude that we use today with Greenwich Mean Time. Our entire time zones are set up on longitude and latitude. Our aerial planes take place, our combat positions in the military. Everything is on this longitude and latitude grid. Thoth is the one that actually set it up. Incredible. Thoth taught astronomy. And that's a big subject. That means the nature of the stars, that we're not just looking at when we look up into space, we're not just looking at fireflies, who knows what the ancients thought, but he wanted them to know they were looking at other planets and other stars. He taught them about lunar eclipses and solar eclipses that come usually about 3 weeks apart, something like that. Every year we have lunar and solar eclipses. He taught them about the existence of comets and meteors. And as we know, this is something, meteors just come and strike the earth or fly by. Comets have a recurring revolution. He taught them about the knowledge of the planetary orbits. And in fact, we have in the Sumerian cuneiform glyphs 12 planets. That includes Neptune, that wasn't discovered until the 1700s, and Uranus, Pluto, that wasn't discovered, I think, until like the beginning of the 20th century. It also includes Nibiru, the planet that some of the gods come from. So we could all see Mercury and Mars and Venus, but really, even at the time of Galileo, a lot of this knowledge had been lost. 1500 AD, the Catholic Church had been burning books. They had been destroying knowledge. And so when Galileo looked through the telescope and said, look, there's a world out there, this was heresy. Okay, the earth was supposed to be the center, according to Catholic stupidity at the time, of the universe. And of course, that's not true. So this was all known in the ancient world. We knew that we went around the sun. We knew that planets needed suns to survive. We knew that the stars were suns. It all got lost someplace along the way. So it's good it's been found again. This meant also knowledge of the 12 signs of the zodiac. What is the zodiac? I don't know if you've ever asked yourself. I mean, there's a bunch of constellations out there. I mean, literally, probably, hundreds. But what the zodiac is the flat plate of the ecliptic. It's like a 7-degree inner tube. And all the planets go around on this flat plate, except for Pluto, that's a little cattywampus towards the end. He kind of moves, he's still on the ecliptic, but he moves inside of Neptune's orbit and then outside. He's a little deranged, poor little Pluto, who got demoted, but he doesn't know it, so he still operates as the same electromagnetic energy field he always did, whether he's a planet or a planetoid. So the 12 signs of the zodiac are literally the celestial backdrop for all of the planets in our entire solar system, and so that's one of the reasons they're so very important. He taught them the existence of the pole stars. Now, most of us know Polaris is our current pole star, but most of us don't realize that the pole star changes from age to age. And think of it like the antenna. The North Pole has an antenna pointed towards the pole star, and all the rest of the stars go around it, in a big circle. You can see it's right here. Okay, but this pole star actually changes, and I'm going to show you an image in just a little bit of how it changes over a course of time. Thoth was called one who made the calculations concerning the heavens, the stars, and the earth. So he was obviously very busy as an astronomer. And he understood something called the precession. Now, this is not procession. Procession means to go forward. Precession means to go backward. It's a predecessor. It's before. Precession of the ages. What does that mean? The precession of the ages is 25,920 years, or you could say 26,000 years if you want to shorten it off. I always like remembering the numbers because these add up to 9, 2 plus 5 is 7, 8, 9, 9 plus 9 is 18, 1 plus 8 is 9. Everything adds up to 9 almost, 360, 3 plus 6 is 9. And this is because of the 9 silent ones, or the 9 primordial energies. I call them the Council of Nine, the 9 primordial energies that penetrate the whole universe. Most of these sacred number combinations usually result in a 9, so I always enjoy that. But during this course of time, what happens is when we're on the earth and we see the vernal or spring sun rise on March 23rd, we say, what is the celestial backdrop? What of the 12 signs of the zodiac is the celestial backdrop for the sun? Okay, now for the last 2,000 years, it's been Pisces, right? Okay, before that, it was Aries. Before that, it was Taurus. Before that, it was Gemini. Before that, it was Cancer. Okay, so the next one that's coming in is the age of Aquarius. That's right here. So we're literally kind of right here on this edge between these two. We entered 0 degrees of Aquarius in 1939. Each one of these degrees takes 72 years. So each sign is roughly about 30 degrees wide. So 30 degrees times 72 years comes up to 2,160 years. 2160. Okay, so if you add 12 zodiac signs times 2160, you come up to 25,920. So that's how long it takes for us to go through all 12 signs. When Atlantis fell, we were over here in Leo. Okay, so then we had the flood in Cancer. And receding and recovering from the flood. We had communication all over the world starting in Gemini. We had the building of lots of temples and things that still are up today in Egypt and Greece and many places in Taurus. We had war, and more war. Alexander the Great, the Roman Empire, all that arose in the age of Aries. In the age of Pisces, we had Jesus come to give us the message, the kingdom of heaven is within, love is the answer, forgiveness is the key. Of course, most of us, it got lost along the way somehow with, the warlike energy of Aries and the Roman Empire adopting it. They used the Roman Empire warlike might. The Aryan energy didn't want to let go. And unfortunately, we did not have a peaceful last 2,000 years. We've had a tough go of it. But now we have Aquarius coming in, okay, and that's going to change everything. It already has in the last 72 years when you think about, computers and cell phones and fax machines and space travel and airplanes and, and we're, we only hit the first degree of Aquarius in 2012. So imagine how exciting the next 2,160 years is going to be if we can make it through this very difficult impasse that we've all been, going through, where the dark powers, the patriarchy does not want to let go. The fossil fuel industry, the pharmaceuticals, all of them are still, they've got tentacles. And so not that there aren't good things being done in all of those, but it's now time for us to graduate to another level. And so we have a tension between the old way and the new way. And so so we can see here from, this is a beautiful depiction of the sun in the age of Taurus, okay? And here's Aries over here and, you know, Gemini over here. So the energies of each zodiacal sign are like, they're electromagnetic, and they bathe the earth in certain kinds of energies affecting human consciousness. And Thoth understood this. He taught astronomy and he taught astrology because he knew that these ages affect the rise and fall of knowledge, of spiritual awakening, and of consciousness. They affect the kind of societies we create. They affect entire civilizations. In other words, the civilization we're going to create in Aquarius is so different. Think about if we were teleported back to, you know, the 1700s, cowboys and Indians, okay, with a cell phone, okay, and an iPod, okay, and headphones, okay, and where's our computer and where's the internet, okay? Let's think if we were transported back to the 1500s or the 1400s, okay? You know, just imagine, I mean, how about indoor plumbing, okay? They probably had privies mostly and chamber pots, okay? It's a totally different consciousness from age to age. The souls, you know, may be reincarnations of some of the souls we have today, of course, but we were dealing with a different energy that was surrounding us at the time. So Thoth understood this. And this, of course, is how that movement happens over the 25,920 years. So here we are, let's see, Polaris. Okay, so we are moving this way. Okay, so around 2000 BC, Thuban was our pole star, and Thuban is a star in the constellation of Draco the Dragon, which is right up there in the North Pole. About 5000 BC it was here. 15,000 BC over near Lyra. This would have probably been a really good time, okay? And Cygnus. So we actually, believe it or not, you know, as we get over here, we fall into more of the darkness, 1 AD. As we move this way, we move much more into the light. So I have an entire presentation I did for Portal to Ascension on the cycles of time, where I really go into depth about explaining these cycles, if any of you guys are interested. And I also, of course, am teaching this in the Mystery School Discourse. It's a big subject. It is very pertinent to where we are today, because we're not languishing back in the Middle Ages. We're literally on the verge of a whole world change in consciousness. And this is also an easy way to sort of see it. Here's the flat plane of the ecliptic. That's that inner tube, 7-degree inner tube, all the planets go around on. Here, of course, is the inclination of the slant of the Earth, okay? That's 23.4 degrees, okay? And that's what causes the seasons. But this is how the North Pole operates. Right now, we're pointing towards Polaris. It's an antenna. But over the course of 26,000 years, it rotates like a top, like this. When we're pointing towards Vega, the antenna is getting extremely clear information from the center of the galaxy, okay? When we're pointing towards Polaris, there's a lot of static on the line. So of course we fall asleep, our consciousness falls asleep. As we move more this way, we begin to wake up, and this way, we wake up more and more. Our civilizations wake up, the human beings wake up, consciousness awakens, because we're getting a lot clearer signal on the energetic, antenna of our planet. So Thoth taught not only astronomy, but he also taught astrology. And he encoded a lot of this information in the tarot cards, and taught it, of course, to the priests and priestesses of Kemet, or Egypt. The esoteric fields, what is astronomy? It's astrology, it's the esoteric fields, effects of the electromagnetic fields on people, earth, and consciousness. And I'm an astrologer as well as a clairvoyant. I do a lot of healing with people. I always love talking with other astrologers. It's always interesting because it depends on the lens you're seeing through. I've sat on a couch with one astrologer and we looked at someone's chart and they pointed out everything bad in the chart, negative, and I pointed out everything good. And guess what? We were both right. So I look through the lens of who is this soul? What could this soul have been wanting to create in their life before they ever came down when they were up there in heaven meeting with their guides? What was their plan, and how could I help them to get on track, stay on track, and to bring forth their gifts to be the best version of themselves? So if you're ever interested in getting, a chart reading, I certainly do those with people all the time. So Thoth taught, this is a quote, the signs and the seasons of the ages. So he really each of these are divided into three, they call them decants, 1 through 10, 11 through 20, 21 through 30. Signs and seasons of the ages. This is a big conversation, but you can see Thoth knew a lot. He was a master of sound, and I love this too. Look at these levitating blocks. This is in the Celtic lands. They always want to know how those blue stones from Stonehenge came all the way from Scotland, where the blue stones are quarried, to England. How in the world did they transport the Stonehenge stones? And of course, it was through levitation and sound. Thoth designed the harp or the lute for Horus, also known as Apollo, although the Greeks, started Apollo and Horus. If you ever read Herodotus, again, he'll tell you that Isis got turned into Demeter, Horus got turned into Apollo. But then the Greeks said that Apollo was born from Zeus, and that's not all true. They kind of got it a little muddled, but the lute or the harp is a very beautiful instrument. Thoth was the master of the was. Now you remember me talking about the was. This is the was. It's really a tuning fork. That's really what it is, and it's an instrument for raising the kundalini on the body. That's what it's used for. Now here we see three Hermetic symbols in one: the Ankh, the symbol for eternal life, the was right here, and then the Djet or the Tet. Now I've talked about the Tet or the Djet before. It's a symbol of regeneration, a symbol of Osiris, a symbol of eternal life through regenerating power. So this is sort of like saying through using the power of sound, we regenerate our life and help to restore our bodies for eternal life. That'd be a brief interpretation of those Hermetic symbols. But these three are all very, very important. The was is a healing instrument, and it's used to open up and clear blocks in the chakras and to open up these inner channels, these open meridian lines, to pull the energy up and to clear blocks to the central, parasympathetic, and sympathetic nervous systems, much as we're using tuning forks in healing work today. Now, there are 5 primary instruments, and he's seen with more than that, but these are probably the 5 that he carried. The was, and we see a little miniature version here around eternal life. Okay, and here he's sitting on a throne carrying the was, and this would be Ma'at, goddess of cosmic law. The caduceus, which we've seen, symbol of spiritual enlightenment and spiritual technology of enlightenment, being able to pull the 3 nervous systems up together. But it also defines the pathways of the rising kundalini. And we can see this from this very beautiful glyph, this kundalini, that they cross the nervous systems at each of the chakras, which is why the chakras act as storage cabinets for our nervous system, for our memories, for our emotional body, for our mental thoughts, for our energy. And this is why clearing these chakras of emotional debris, past life memories, current traumas is so very important in order to be able to very gently begin to pull this energy up your spine. And I do a lot of that kind of work here in Atlanta. I can't do that over the phone. The clairvoyant readings and the astrology, I can certainly do those sessions over the phone, but to do the healing work, I actually have to have your body in person. Okay. So it also reminds us of our DNA, doesn't it? The caduceus. connected with cosmogenesis. And of course, Thoth was one of the three gods that was given acknowledgement for helping to genetically jumpstart mankind around 200,000 years ago. So it's linked to his role, Ningishzida, the god Ledu Ningishzida, the god Ningishzida. And here we see him with the leopard, with flying wings. Leopard has to do with the technology of the heart, and the serpents. The third implement is the writing stylus, which we began this whole presentation with. Why was writing so important? Because writing allows history and knowledge to be passed down to future generations. If we don't have writing, you know, we fall into, all we have is tales. And as we know from the game of Whisper, even a really good historical tale can get distorted over time, not even because the people intended it. It's just the memories are faulty, or people die of accidents and the knowledge is lost. Thoth brought the human race writings. Now, what we know of course, is, you know, hieroglyphics, right? But with hieroglyphics, you might have to learn, you know, hundreds and hundreds of them. And as we can see, writing allows the transmission of information to be passed from generation to generation. The gods taught writing to mankind. You can always tell because the gods have these bigger craniums. Okay, this is a human with a not very big cranium, and this looks like one of their maybe one of their children who was also with the big cranium, or maybe a demigod. Okay, so in fact, in Egypt, being a scribe was a very big deal. It was a very, very honored position because, you know, what, 3 to 5% of the, maybe 10% of the population could read. A person who could read and write was called a scribe. It was one of the best. Being a scribe took many years of training. Successful scribes never had to do manual labor. They were highly respected in society. And, you know, you can sort of see whenever you go to the Egyptian Museum at the Met or some of these other beautiful museums, you usually see them sitting in this position, the yoga position, all ready to take dictation. So, of course, we know the Egyptian hieroglyphics. However, what you probably don't realize is that Thoth invented the 26-letter alphabet that we use today. So with 26 letters, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z, we basically can make millions of words. And this is, of course, all the Romance languages: French, Spanish, Italian, English. I think there are 5 Romance languages, Portuguese, and I can't remember what the other one was. They're all written in these letters. This was all invented by Thoth. Now, the fourth instrument is the measuring rod. And this is, of course, because of his job as an architect and knowing the measure of all things, the measure of the heavens, the measure of the pyramids. And, of course, he would have been the father to really all the masons, wouldn't he have? All those that were trained. And this is a precursor. And many times you'll see with the masons, you know, their symbol becomes the compass and the square, doesn't it? Okay, which is really beautiful. So the square is a way of saying, are you on the level? Are you being truthful? Are you living in accordance with cosmic law? The compass inscribes the entire world. And of course, many times you'll see it creating a 6-pointed star representing the balance between the male and the female. Here we even see these garlands draped casually over these columns, very much like the DNA. Very much like the activation of that Kundalini energy. Both designed the pyramids, and of course math and geometry were essential, as well as astronomy, to the developing of that and many, many other sacred sites around the world. These are the foundations of both modern and ancient civilizations. Without them, we wouldn't be able to build any of our skyscrapers, any of our buildings, plan any of our roads. You know, it would all be kind of very willy-nilly. What was the fifth instrument? The Merkaba field. Now, many of you may have heard of the Merkaba field. Here's a perfectly balanced Merkaba field, male and female, the triangle pointing up and the triangle pointing down that Thoth is holding, as well as the stylus, as well as the ankh, as well as the third eye that he's sitting on. What is the Merkaba field? It's an energetic chariot that allows the meditator to begin to soul travel, to begin to build a force field around their body through which dark forces cannot penetrate, and through which you can send your consciousness into higher realms or higher dimensions. Consequently, Thoth was known as the great initiate and the great teacher. And here we have Anubis, the opener of the ways, holding hands with the soul that has died, an initiate, taking them into the halls of Amente. Here their heart is put in a canopy jar, and it's weighed on a balance scale against the feather of Ma'at. Ma'at is cosmic truth, okay? If your heart is as light as a feather, go on into heaven. If you live with a hard heart, an unforgiving heart, a heavy heart, you haven't learned your lesson. Go on back to earth. You got to reincarnate because you haven't figured it out yet. And of course, Thoth is writing the results in the Book of Life. Horus is intervening on behalf of the initiate with his father Osiris. So think of Osiris as an earlier incarnation of the soul that was Jesus, the Lord of Light. You know, these beings, these great beings, they come back every several thousand years because they don't want to leave us in darkness. And usually the human race doesn't always do so well with their messages. So we take it and we turn it over 7,000 different times, try to understand it, get some of it right and get some of it wrong. So here he is on his throne, the four sons of Horus. These would be the four Kumaras, okay, that are on the lotus blossom. And here's Isis with a three-step crown, and Nephthys, her sister, solar and lunar aspects of the divine feminine. And then, of course, Osiris is acting, actually, here's the eye of God, giving him the feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth. He's acting as a dispenser of justice. You can think of him like the lords of karma, saying, you know, in the end, all will be revealed. You know, we see your heart. And, you know, it's not about judgment day in the sense of guilt or blame or shame or all the crazy stuff we all learned growing up in these Judeo-Christian religions. It's about saying, you know, are you living out of love? Are you living in alignment with truth, spiritual truth? Are you, you know, not about service to self, you're about working for unity consciousness. So Thoth is writing the results in the Book of Life. He was known as the messenger of the gods, the guider of souls into the realm of the dead. And along with his daughter Isis and her husband Osiris and their son Horus, Thoth set up the great mystery schools, training the priests and priestesses. And they established temples of wisdom and light not only in Egypt, which of course was the major, let's say, motherland or the fountain of the mysteries for much of the world, but then later, as we're going to see, Thoth sent out spiritual initiates in many other lands. He himself and Isis and Osiris went to those lands, in the Celtic lands, for example. Isis probably would have been known as a brigade, and Osiris would have been known as Gwyn Nun Up, who is the god of the dead, the Lord of Light, and the god of the dead, because of course Osiris was killed. So these temples of wisdom and light were really for us. They were for us to awaken and remember who we are. These schools were designed to activate a deeper human awareness of the fact that we are beings of light, immortal beings of light, basically trapped in a human body, okay? And for the duration of the life that we're going to have, this is our vehicle. We have to hopefully treat it well so it doesn't break down or hurt too much. But we have to discover that we're immortal, that we exist beyond the body, and to remind us that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, immortal beings having a physical experience. That's an important thing for us to remember. And in fact, over the lintel of the doorway at the Oracle of Delphi in Greece, another great mystery site, it said, know thyself. That's the first commandment, to know thyself. Well, you know, if you just know yourself at the superficial level, you might say, oh yeah, I know what kind of foods I like. I know, how I like to dress and shop. No, they're not talking about that. They're talking about know who you are at the deepest level of your soul. Discover who you are not only in your past lifetimes, in this lifetime, but also at the higher celestial realms. Who are you in the fourth dimension, in the fifth dimension, the sixth dimension? Not from ego, but from a discovery of your own true immortal nature. And this allows us to begin to gain the perspective to transform our lives in the here and now, and not to live under the yoke of slavery, basically mental or emotional or physical or spiritual slavery. Now, the Sphinx was the doorway to a vast underground temple complex, and I can talk at length about all of this, but certainly there were two columns in front of the Sphinx. Initiates went through these columns, and then they went into the heart of the Sphinx, the heart of the lion, and there was a whole complex underneath. In my Jesus book, I actually have a map to that, of drawings of what it all looked like. And of course, this is one of many places, an important one, where these rites of initiation took place within the great spiritual mystery schools. Those teachings were the bedrock of those mystery schools, and he was known as the patron of the written word, and he maintained the library of the gods with the help of his wife Sishat, who was also a goddess of writing. He was often described as the scribe of the gods. Now, Manetho, who was actually an Egyptian high priest at the time in the New Kingdom, at the time of the second Ptolemy, he was a high priest at the Temple of Heliopolis, tells us that Thoth wrote some 36,525 books. That's like, what? Like, that's astonishing. But I guess if you live for thousands and thousands of years, it's possible. But interestingly enough, there is a correlation that there are 365.25 days in each year. But Manetho was actually a very kind of historical guy, so it's possible that he did write this many books, or it also is possible that this number was encoded so that this knowledge would not be forgotten. After the burning of the Library of Alexandria that had over 700,000 scrolls in it, and the Serapeum, which they've just recently rediscovered and restored so that people can go in it since 2012, the Serapeum had 40,000 scrolls in it. The Muslims and the Christians both burned the Library of Alexandria. Only 4 books remain to us today. In 100 AD or CD Common Era, Clement of Alexandria, who was an initiate of many great schools and became a Christian, and one of the early church fathers, reports that there were 42 books of Thoth that contained all the wisdom and knowledge of the world, including medicine, herbs, science, astronomy, astrology, physics, writing, cosmology, law, and magic. That's pretty interesting. So whether there were really 36,000 books or not, we know there were 42 of them, and that was at 100 AD. Those currently known books are the Emerald Tablets, which we're going to look at, the Hermetica, the Caballion, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and the mystical books of the Core Cosmo, which we're really not going to go into. But I want to just mention some of these others before we really dive into the Emerald Tablets, because they're all really beautiful and powerful and worth knowing. Now, the Caballion is a study of Hermetic philosophy, and it basically contains Thoth's 7 Hermetic principles. It was studied in Egypt, it was studied by the Greeks, it was studied by the Essenes. This was really important knowledge. It was studied by the Persians. And I have a whole presentation on this, but I'm just going to tell you the first law, okay? The first principle is that the universe is conscious. In other words, the universe responds to thoughts. The entire universe is contained within the Creator's mind, and thus the universe responds to our minds. So what we think, what we say with emotion and feeling, we begin to create out of the fabric of the ethers. We begin to attract to us or repel So if you say, oh, my back is killing me, if you say that all the time, guess what? In time, your back will kill you. Your body will hear you, okay? If you say, this job is killing me, guess what? You know, it just might do it unless you get out of that job. So we have to watch what we say. We have to say things. This is why the principle of gratitude. Thank you, universe, for my great abundance. Thank you for my friends. Thank you for my support at work. Thank you for all the people who love me and support me. Thank you for all the ways in which the universe rises to support me and my life moves with flow and grace. The more we say it, the more we enter into the energy, the words, and the attitude of gratitude, the more the positive flow will happen in our life. So this is the one principle that I'm sharing with you today, reminding you that consciousness is everywhere. And we have to be conscious of our words and our thoughts. This is, of course, supported by discoveries in quantum physics, where we've discovered that when we split an electron off of an atom, that the electron goes in different places depending on the thoughts of the observer. So remember to ask and affirm, believe, and then allow yourself to receive. Okay, so that's the only one of those I'm going to share with you today. Pretty fun, huh? Okay, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Now this is complicated. Basically, it was called the Heru, which means the coming forth into the day, the manifesting into the light, or making strong or perfect the coup. What is the coup? The coup is the soul body. Okay, in Egypt there were 9 aspects to the soul. You've probably heard of the Ka, you've heard of the Ba, maybe you've heard of the Ren. Ku is the soul body. Okay, so just like we think of having a physical body, an etheric body, is astral body, an emotional body, a mental body, a causal body, a soul body, a spiritual, etheric, or Buddhic body. They also knew that we had many layers to us. Okay, so the Ku is the soul body. So when we say making perfect the Ku, it's perfecting our soul essence. Okay. So this is actually the book itself, incredible, in book form. These books were found inscribed upon a block of iron in letters of real lapis lazuli under the feet of the majesty of the god Thoth in the time of Mer-Ka-Ra by the royal son of Heru Tatuf, triumphant. And this, of course, is the famous Egyptologist E.A. Wallace Budge who tells us this. Now, once we discovered the Pyramid of Saqqara, there's that step pyramid that's very, very old, and we went down inside of it, we discovered what we call the pyramid text. Now, there was all this copies of the Egyptian Book of the Dead written on the wall of Saqqara. So the Book of Coming Forth into the Day is known from 5 separate copies inscribed on the chamber walls of the pyramids of Saqqara. These are also known as the pyramid texts. They were first uncovered in 1881 by the French Egyptologist M. Maspero, another Egyptologist. The first texts were found in the pyramid tomb of the pharaoh Unas, who ruled Egypt in 3,333 BC. That's a mouthful. That's kind of a master number, huh? And was the last of the 5th dynasty kings. They were arranged in perpendicular lines and painted green. Maspero went on to open the Pyramid of Tetna, the first king of the 6th dynasty, circa 3300 BC, and it too was covered with hieroglyphics, many of which were the same as the Saqqara pyramid text, with some additions. Next was the Pyramid of Pepi I, 3233 BC. Maspero found the same text, plus many additional unknown passages. Next, he opened the Pyramid of Mer-Un-Ra, 3200 BC, the 4th king of the 6th dynasty, and lastly the Pyramid of Pepi II, 3166 BC, the 5th king of the 6th dynasty. And all of them basically, repeat the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So the Egyptian Book of the Dead, again, this is a bigger conversation, but I'm just giving you a little insight into it. It consists of 3 parts: a clear passage through the inner worlds for when you die, prayers to the divinities for oneness, and one's life in the afterlife. pretty interesting. So the book was usually written on some 20 to 90 feet of papyrus and placed in the tombs of the deceased person as a guide to the afterlife. And the only complete version of it that's on display in a museum is in the Turin Museum in Italy, that I've been to many, many times when I take people to Damanhur. And if you're interested in ever going there, you know, I've kind of been grounded from going on my long trips that I've done for many years, the last few years, because I have a 94-year-old mom and she's very precarious, and we're in the process of, you know, eliminating, you know, dissolving everything in her 60-year house. So, you know, next year, maybe in the fall, I will wind up doing a trip. But if you're ever interested in Egypt or England or south of France, the Magdalene Mysteries, or Damanhur, Italy, these are, you know, just write me at my email, which is Tricia McCannon, and it's 1111, like 4 columns, 1111 at yahoo.com, and say, would love to go to Damanhur or whatever with you, and just leave your name and phone number and information, and I'll, you know, contact you when I see I'm going to do a trip. So, but Turin is an incredible place, and a whole version of it is there. So again, I'm just giving you a little teeny taste. So here we see the deceased, the soul of the deceased has risen. This is the gold. The personality of the deceased here, this is the Ka, is going with Anubis. Anubis is the escorter into the halls of Amente, okay? So, and then the journey of the soul begins, and where you go, what happens to you, you know, the things you encounter, the ring past knots, the code words to get through certain stages of the journey. So the chapter of the soul passing over the earth, Anubis stands over the soul as the guide. Here you can sort of see. Okay, so that's all I'm going to show you for the Egyptian Book of the Dead, but it's confusing to read it in the current form for most people, and the reason is because it's been rewritten like 3 separate times, and things taken out of order. But if you understand some of this stuff mystically, which I do because I have, you know, soul traveled since I was a young person, and I'm an initiate of the Viragi masters, the Sahaji masters, many initiatory schools, including the Egyptian and the Celtic, then you can understand when they talk about, you know, I have become the Benu bird, or I've become the phoenix. In other words, I've been reborn. I've been reborn as a being of light. So again, if this is all Hermetics, so it's really fascinating stuff. But I can understand if you were to get the book, you might be pretty confused trying to make it out. So maybe I'll do a presentation on it sometime. Okay, the Hermetica. This one is great. Now, recently we had this wonderful translation of it by Timothy Freak and Peter Gandy, and they did a beautiful job. This is definitely worth getting and having in your library, the Hermetica, and I would recommend this copy. It's beautiful. It deals with those discoveries about the nature of God, which he calls Atum. Now, God, as we know, you know, that name has been used, you know, to justify wars and murder and mamma mia, all these things. So of course, when, you know, it's got a lot of baggage with it. So we can use other words, but really it means the divine creator of intelligent oneness and love that connects the universe. Atum is the name that the Egyptians gave to God. Okay, and I love that term. Sugmad is another one that doesn't have any history or baggage with it. So you can use either one, but it's about the nature of God, or Atum, the infinite intelligence of the Creator. It tells the story of the creation of mankind as a spiritual being that then came to have a body made by Atum, or God, and joined with the form of the gods genetically because they're similar in form. In other words, the soul is created by God. The container, the body that we're in, might differ from planet to planet. Some species might be taller or shorter, or have larger eyes, or different complexion, or they might have 3 or 5 fingers instead of, or 6 or 7 instead of just 5 like we do. So the container can differ, but basically the containers that we had down here, whether it was Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon or whoever it was, got genetically mixed with the containers or the bodies of the gods that walked upright, that had more mental capacity and far more potential for spiritual evolution. So this book, along with many other things, talks about who we really are and how we came to be as a species. It tells the creation of human culture by Isis and Osiris after the great destruction of the flood. They taught, and of course after the flood, as you can imagine, so many people died, animals wiped out, cities wiped out, agriculture wiped out. People were crazy. They were killing each other. Cannibalism was rampant. Rape was rampant. It was not good. So Isis and Osiris came down and brought order to everything. They ended human slaughter. They ended cannibalism. They instituted marriage. They built temples. They taught the importance of the divine spark within all of us and God. They built temples and had funerary rites. They gave food and shelter because people were hungry. They taught agriculture. This is why Osiris is called the green god. They became lawmakers. They taught the arts of sailing, healing, philosophy, family values, and then they set up the mystery schools. And this is all, in the last 12,000 years after the Great Flood happened, in order to bring civilization back and to tend to the human soul so that we didn't just become these crazy, hungry, primitive animals again. So this book speaks about the essence of the soul. It says all souls are parts of the one soul, which is the soul of the cosmos. Souls all have one nature. They are neither male nor female. Such differences of sex arise only in the body. So Thoth knew long ago something that we seem to have forgotten. When we oppress women, when we deny them the same rights as men, whether it's education or it's freedom or the right to pursue a career or art or relationship, we're suppressing ourselves because maybe in the next life we get to come in and be the person that's suppressed. The soul is beyond gender. That's only the body. Birth is not the beginning of life, only of an individual awareness. Change into one state is not death, only the end of this awareness. Most people are ignorant of the truth and therefore afraid of death, believing it to be the greatest of all evils. But death is only the dissolution of a worn-out body. Our term of service as guardians of the world is ended when we are freed from the bonds of this mortal frame and restored, cleansed and purified to the primal condition of our higher nature. Now, not only is that beautiful, because it reminds us that we are immortal, and that, the Greeks used to talk about how when the souls were coming down into the human form, they were crying and wailing, no, no, don't put us back in those bodies. They're so limited. We have to suffer so much. We're missing our home. Okay. So he's reminding us that our home is there, but for a period of time, 20 years, 40, 60, 80, 100, we have come into this world not only as a teaching schoolroom, but as guardians of this planet. That means people who should stand up for truth, for goodness, for honor, for honesty, for kindness, for love. We can make of this world anything we want of it, but only if we stand up, only if enough of us stand up. And to remember that if we die, hey, we're coming back. We are immortal beings. Death is not the end. It's only the end of a particular tenure down here. The Hermetica. It shares love songs to attune the divine. It shows prophecies of our age, the fall of the great wisdom of Egypt in the Dark Ages or the Kali Yuga, and it also prophesizes the rediscovery of this wisdom that will return in our age. And this, of course, is one of the reasons why, I teach it and why people like you will go on to share it and teach it with others. So we're part of the Light Brigade to spread this knowledge. The student of pure philosophy, Thoth writes, studies the sciences, not as fanciful theories, but as a devotion to Atum, because they reveal a universe perfectly ordered by the power of number, because measure in the depths of the sea and the forces of fire and the magnitudes of physical things leads to a reverent awe and the Creator's skill and wisdom. Because the mysteries of music bear witness to the unsurpassed talent of the supreme artist who has beautifully harmonized all things into a single whole, suffused with great sweet melodies. You can see that Thoth, I mean, his heart and his eyes and his mind were open to the beauty in all things. Now he gives a prophecy for our age and for what will come after him. My teachings will seem more obscure in times to come when they are translated from our Egyptian mother tongue into that of the Greeks. Translation will distort much of their meaning. Expressed in our native language, meaning Egyptian, the teachings are clear and simple, for the very sound of an Egyptian words resonates with the thing signified by itself. All possible measures should be taken to prevent these holy secrets being corrupted by translation to the Greek, which is an arrogant, feeble, and showy language, unable to contain the cogent force of my words. The Greek language lacks the power to convince, and the Greek philosophy is nothing but noisy chatter. Our Egyptian speech is more than talk. Its utterances are replete with power. So I, thrice great Hermes, the first of men to attain all knowledge, have inscribed the secrets of the gods in sacred symbols and holy hieroglyphs on these stone tablets, which I have concealed for a future world that may seek out our sacred wisdom. Through all-seeing mind, and I myself have been the witness of the invisible things of heaven, and through contemplation come to knowledge of the truth. This knowing I have set down in these writings. So what he does is he foretells the fall of knowledge, and he foretells that he will return. And of course, he actually goes on to talk about how strangers will come to Egypt and occupy it, and the knowledge will be largely lost. And of course, we saw Christians and then Muslims that occupy it now. However, having said that, if you go to Egypt, certainly there are gatekeepers and people who tend those temples who I think are very tuned in. Whether they're the souls of ancient Egyptians, I don't know, or whether the temples themselves have conveyed this sense of knowledge to them. I think that even though in large part, it's societies are oblivious, I think that there are some wonderful temple keepers in some of the temples in Egypt that still at some level are really tuned in. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Emerald Tablets. How's everybody doing out there? I know I can't see your responses, but we're about, just so you know, about 100 slides into this presentation, or 120, something like that, and so we're about halfway through.